Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and we're joined today by a legendary human being and a fantastic musician and drummer, Denny Seiwell. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hi, y'all.
Boy, for not being a soloist, you did pretty good on that, man. You had a lot to say.
It's 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I'm waking up yet.
Well, it's an honor to be here in your studio. I just, if you could talk a little bit about the brotherhood that you were part of and how you maintain connected to that brotherhood that still exists today.
Well, that brotherhood only existed then, believe me. I'm sure it exists today in some shape or form, but you're talking basically about New York when I started.
I'm talking about the fact that I could ask you about any of the Mercurial cats that I basically want to talk to, and you're like, yeah, I got their number. I've talked to, you stay connected.
Yes, we do. Because it was such an important time in history, in music, should I say, especially in New York, where I broke my way into the studio there and met all of my heroes and all of these cats that have stayed connected over the years, because Facebook helped a lot with that too. I gotta say that right up front. I looked up Arnie Wise, an old buddy of mine, just the other day, and
play with Bill Evans.
Yeah,
and he's there.
All of these cats still viable in the music business. They play more for their hearts and their souls. Because I came from a class of guys. We would do it if we didn't get paid. We would do it for free because we had to do it. And that's the beauty of music, man. When it gets into your bones and into your soul, you're going to do it just because you do it. And you have to do it after a while. And when you don't do it, you're a miserable SOB.
And let's be clear, Denny, it's about playing with peeps, real people in the room hitting at the same time.
Absolutely, man. I never made a record where the drums go down first. They spend 3 days getting drum sounds, then you spend 2 days getting a perfect part that's comped together after computer and rearrange and throw this part, we get together, 5 of us, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 12, 13, get together in the studio, and the magic happens by one musician listening to another musician and playing off of what it's called musicianship. And those days are so few and far between, and today I still get to make records like that occasionally, not like in the past, but when you put a bunch of players together in a room and you kick it off and it goes to where nobody knows it's going to go, it's magical. And that's why I still play the drums every day. I love playing music. I'd sit in my studio and play forever, but I have the good luck of playing with great other musicians many times throughout the year.
So can you talk, you were very eloquent. We've done 3 radio interviews, and one of them you were talking about with Zoot and Sims and the Poconos. Keeping time in that setting of music was on the top of the kit, not so much on the bass drum.
Yeah, well, today's music is more based around... it's all groove music.
Right.
And in those days, if you played the bass drum at all, it was... That was the time carrier. The ride cymbal was the time carrier. Or the hi-hat. That's when the time came with the right hand. And today's music is a little bit more about the bottom end of the drum. Even for some rock, some jazz stuff today is played with a lot more tom-toms too. I can't think of anything offhand.
Well, no, I'm curious. Like, when you were the perfect person to ask about this, I mean, how did playing time on the top of the kit lend itself to breaking up time and form in jazz, if that's the right word to use, or melodic improvisation?
Yeah. Well,
because there was a time where there was always 4 on the floor. That was earlier, but then that went away.
But now when you just, this is carrying the music, the ride beat, and now you have an open palette here. So the bass drum can go. much more interesting than, even some of the tracks I did with McCartney. It's a piece in 3. It almost feels like jazz.
Exactly. Well, I was going to ask you, were you...
It's the song Just Another Day. It's just another day. It's in 3/4, like a waltz tempo. There's all kind of stuff. And for drummers, the jazz palette is much larger than the rock and roll palette. Although there's a lot of very interesting young groups out there. I mean, I like a lot of the new stuff. And they are stretching the boundaries of pop or rock music at the moment.
Could you explain how they're stretching the vocabulary in rock, in your mind?
Oh, that guy, geez. Oh,
or is there a way to demonstrate it as opposed to just dropping a name?
There's a tune that I teach a lot of my students off of this tune, and I can't remember the guy's name off my top of my head now, or the group. I'd have to look it up.
It's fine. I'd like you to talk to the audience about...
But they're playing stuff in 9. They're playing some odd metered stuff. Sting's, what's that song, 7 Days? Let me just put that on one
yeah,
brief
go
second.
ahead. Go ahead.
I can find this puppy real fast.
All the records here that Denny has been on. There's the Ram album.
Sting would be S. This is really interesting. OPQR. S. Sting. 7 Days.
All right.
We'll play already. Why am I not here? Oh, because I don't have the sound.
Yeah, and then people are loving this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, if they take it off some simple patterns.
It sounds a little more African, actually.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. But that was Vinny Colaiuto playing on that.
Well, Vinny's, yeah.
He does some brilliant drumming on that.
Do you think that McCartney wanted you, because of the jazz aesthetic that you could bring to his rock music?
Well, I'd like to label that different. I think it's because of the musicianship that I brought to the table. When we did the Ram album, that was by no means a standard pop formula kind of a recording. Explain
how that went down, because that's really away from the formula, the standard pop record. How was it different?
I mean, he would just come. First of all, Paul McCartney is probably one of the best known musicians on the planet. At that point in time, he just left the Beatles, and he comes to New York to make a record. So you know that more people are going to hear your performance on a Paul McCartney record than they are on some of the records we were making at the time.
Absolutely. Jeremiah or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, Lottie Gold and all those people. But, as a session man, It doesn't get much better than that. So anyway, he came in with that first tune we did was It's Just Another Day.
Yeah.
And when we heard the changes, they were not your typical changes either, your chord changes. And they had little tempo variations in it. They had all of this stuff, which equates to music. It's music. So when first time we heard him play the song, he'd play the song and we'd start working out, playing along with him and working out our parts. We knew right then and there from the first song, this is no ordinary record. We're going to have to go deep into the well. And we did on every tune. It was like so exciting because we couldn't wait to get to work every day. We worked from 9 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock banker's hours, Monday through Friday. And every day would be another challenge, another song would come in. And we would just, within, an hour or two at the most, we would find all of the parts to all of the sections of all of his songs. So what we tried to do was to break the tunes into sections, learn the sections, and then play the song all the way through. Even songs like Uncle Albert. Uncle Albert, I was playing kind of a regular beat. You know, Uncle Albert. And he said, can you find something that more fits the vocal? And it's not an ordinary standard drum part. And I said, well, how does something like Uncle Albert? Or I might have had that backwards. That's right. So things like that was probably the only tune that he asked me to change the drum part that I came up with, which I was so grateful for because we had the opportunity to play whatever we felt. That's why he hired us, which is the right way to make a record and to play with musicians you haven't played with before. Let them play what they feel and hear.
This is important though. You were what we would consider Carmen and Torre, who's tuning in great drummer. A lot of jazz snobs out there, but when you went, can you talk about the first time that you got hooked on Ringo and the Beatles?
Oh, well, I mean, probably that. We've gone through this in an interview before. Joe Beck took me over to Jackie and Roy Krall's house for Thanksgiving, and they had probably one of the first copies of the White Album in town, and we had a great meal. We were hanging after the meal, and I had a few glasses of wine
Sure.
and stuff, and they put the record on, and I just went, holy crap, this is like really interesting music. It's more creative than I was used to hearing in pop. This was not pop. This was classic music that's still around today, of course.
Well, it was totally original, too.
Totally original, and Ringo's drumming was totally unique. And what drew me to Ringo so much was the fact that, like the Uncle Albert exhibit here, I mean, he learned how to play parts to the song. He played for the song, not for a drum beat that would make him famous as a drummer. Famous as a drummer is not an aspiration to live up to. Famous as the drummer that knows how to play songs.
That's a good title of a book right there.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, but what about McCartney's bass playing? Did that hit you? What was the rhythm section like with Ringo? I mean, it might seem evident to people that listen to that stuff, but aesthetically, there was nothing going on like that, really.
Well, no, his bass playing, he raised the bar so high for bass players after that, and musicianship involving bass players, that nobody reached it for many years. There was great funk players and stuff like that, but musical, I'll never forget one day we were at Abbey Road recording, and we were just taking a break, and Paul was talking about how Come Together was brought into the Beatles. John wrote Come Together, and he brought it in to show the guys, and he said, yeah, Come Together, I'm just ding 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 ding, come together ding 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 there ding 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 over you. Now Paul goes, wow, I really like the song, but let's slow it down and go boom boom ding ding boom boom. I went, that's the epitome of Paul McCartney there, his musical artistic mind.
Talking to Denny Seiwell here on the Jake Feinberg Show, having a ball here live in L.A. Can you talk about the attitude that the Jazzers had, especially with the Kai Winding and J.J. Johnson, those guys. I mean, when you would go into those sessions, how much say did the musicians have in terms of, you know, the individual songs that were being cut on those albums?
Well, the jazz world, you had you were hired to do a job, and the job was play the music, and it was whatever you felt. So it wasn't until much later on in rock that they asked you to play certain things.
That's what I want to talk to you about, because
Yeah.
Swallow was telling me, Arif Mardin came in one day in like 71 and was like telling him how to play a bass line on a song that he composed for a Gary Burton album, and he
Right.
got real surly. That, I mean...
That's a rarity.
And that was not existent in the... And they gave you freedom to play what you...
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you couldn't be sloppy, but they let you play what you wanted to
Yeah, no. They in those days, well, most days, when you hire a studio musician, you hire him for his expertise, and you hire him for his skills and his craft and his talent. You don't hire him so you can tell. They have machines that do that other thing. You want something played by this way exactly, you hire a machine to do that, or plug a machine in. And in those days, the creative energy that came from the five cats or however cats in the room playing together, you expected the musicians that you hired to be listening and contributing to the song.
And I learned to play the tune, not just
Yeah.
keep time, but play the tune.
Yeah, you learn from your last take. You know, you do a take and they say, wow, that was really good. Why don't you guys come in and listen to that? And then you'll go in and listen to it and you'll say, wow, I didn't need to throw a fill there because the vocal was in that section. And then all of a sudden, you'll be feeling and playing your part and coming up with the right parts. And then you'll hear a playback and you say, wow, you know what? That section the bridge is too busy. Maybe I should be playing a lot less time because it's setting up the next section. And so the creativity went not only from playing the drums or the instrument you're playing to crafting this beautiful music by listening back and saying, what does the song need here? It doesn't, if I'm in the way of the song, let me back out of that and save it for where it's really needed. So the creative process was not only playing, it was editing, it was self-editing, it was editing within the band, arranging the parts so that everybody made sense. And everybody had fun playing the music, so you worked up a ladder when you recorded the song, and then you were proud of it when you knew that you nailed all of the parts and put them in the right place.
People are asking about Bingo Biondo, Rick Danko.
Yeah.
Seiwell's been all around this world, and before you went to London to work with, or actually...
No, it was much later.
It was later. So, yeah, talk about... So, you talked about Paul's style. What was Rick's style like? I mean, he cut that solo album, but, it had to be a communal feel with him as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Rick is kind of a herky-jerky bass player, very interesting bass player, very fine bass player, but he had a style of his own, a very unique style. It was musical. It was...
Self-taught?
Probably.
Yeah, that's why it was unique.
He was a very unique musician, and I just loved the band. And Levon Helm, just to this day, he's one of my favorite drummers of all time. The fact that he could play the intricate parts that he played on the Skins and sing at the same time, that's unreal, you know. So when I got a chance to work with Rick, I don't remember how that initiated, but I was...
Were you living in Woodstock and just bumped into those cats?
I was living, I made some records up in Woodstock, but I didn't know, I made a Karen Dalton album up there in Woodstock, but I didn't know Rick and the band yet. I met them when I was living in San Francisco at Elliot Mazur's studio, his Master's Wheels. My then business manager, Gary Haber, took us to a band concert. It was the first time I met the guys, you know. And I was doing work at Elliot's studio with Janis Joplin and
Don and Keith Godshaw.
Don and Keith Godshaw. Well, that wasn't done at Elliot's, but it was in that San Francisco time.
Oh, that's right. It was done at their
Andy
studio.
Fairweather Low and some other artists. But all of a sudden, there was a little bit of a connection there. And somehow or another, Rick... I don't know if I auditioned for Bob Dylan before or after I was with Rick, but Bob Dylan needed a drummer, and I'd moved from San Francisco to LA, and I was doing a lot of sessions. And I got called in by Bob's people. They said, Bob can't find a drummer that he's happy with for this oncoming tour. And I said, I don't really want to leave town right now. I'm just establishing myself as a drummer in LA, having moved down from San Francisco. So they talked me into it. I said, come on, Bob, would really love to have you come play with a band. So I did, and I played with a band, and they all...
Who was in that band, like Spooner Oldham? Or who was?
Yeah, those guys.
I didn't know you played with Dylan. All these treasures.
Well, I didn't.
Just a tour
goes on.
You didn't play on. Yeah.
They freaked out when I played with the band, and they said to Bob, "Let's get Denny for this tour. He's perfect." So I said, "All right." You know, he twisted my arm into it, and he said, "Come on down tomorrow for rehearsal, and bring your passport along so we can get visa clearances and stuff." It was a world tour. I said, all right. So I show up for rehearsal the next day. I give his business people my passport so they can start working on all that stuff. And we have rehearsal. And the next day we go down to rehearsal, and it's going fine. The guys loving having me there, and I'm loving being there now. And I'm hanging out. Bob and I are having good times. And then his business people say, oh, no, we'll never get Denny into Japan or Australia because of the international drug bust with Paul McCartney. In 1972 on tour. A fan sent us some weed, and we all went to jail for an hour, signed a few autographs, the promoter paid it off.
Hold on, the cat sent you a bushel of weed from the States to Europe?
No, it was somewhere in Europe.
Wow, so you spent a day in jail. So then
my name was on the package, unfortunately. and Paul and Linda kind of knew about it. I can't get too deep into this.
It's fine.
They went to pick it up at the hotel we were supposed to be at, and I went to sound check. And when the package wasn't there, they came to sound check, and I'm not divulging too much.
No, let me ask you a question. The point is that one of the conditions was you could not go back to those to play there.
Because of the jazz,
the notoriety,
because of the jazz guys in Japan and all, Tony and all those Miles, they all got popped in Japan in the late 60s.
Dude, we were going through, that was when Schwartzberg got the gig with Stan Getz, and then Miles got busted, and then Jack got his gig back.
So there was a lot of that stuff. And so the Dylan people didn't think that I'd be able to get into Japan or Australia. But then I did that with Danko's. Shortly after that, we just submitted my passport kind of at the last minute, and it went right through. There was no problem. So I could have done the Dylan tour, but I'm glad I didn't, because I believe it was 10 months long, which is a long time to be on the road. And Ian Wallace got the gig. God bless him. I loved Ian to death. He was a wonderful drummer. I dearly miss him. He was a true friend too. I'm just curious about comparing Dylan's style in the studio. From what I gather, he kind of would just pick up the guitar and start playing the tune. Yeah, probably so.
Did he have a similar style to McCartney, or was McCartney more verbal in terms of asking for? Because a lot of times if Dylan couldn't verbally express it, they just go out and get somebody else to play the part that he was searching for, the music in his head.
Well, there's a little of each of that. Now, McCartney would come in with a song in his head.
He would?
Yeah, he would come in with the song complete. So he would play it for you a few times, and your job was to get the right part together to accompany that song. Now, Dylan, I haven't worked with him in the studio, but just knowing the way the band recorded and everything, and with Bob, it would be very similar, although they would probably work a little more to find the most organic way of coming about the song. So I think there was a little more organics in it. With Paul just came in with a song, and when the first time you hear it, you say, "Oh my God, that's beautiful." let me find my part in this thing. And it usually didn't take long. We never spent more than a day on a song. And if we worked from 9 to 5, he'd come in at 10:30, and we'd leave at 3 or 4. So we did a track a day, and like that. But Danko, Bingo Biondo, as we called him, was just so playful in his attitude on life, and it reflected so in his music, that he was just a fun guy to be around.
Did you feel like on those tours with Rick that you'd never play the same song once, or was it a pretty standard set list?
We had a set list. But we didn't work that much. We did several tours, a couple of gigs here and there. I don't know if we did more than 100 shows over the period of time, but the set would evolve. There's some great stuff. Rick Danko live in 1977 at the Club Bottom Line in New York. There's a live on YouTube. There's a live show from
McCaff Theater in Passaic is the one we played with a Christmas
concert in Chicago, I think it was, or Skokie. But there's a lot of good stuff, and the band was great. We were a band of brothers. We were in it for all the right reasons, and our motivation was the band. We were channeling, just like I was channeling Ringo with McCartney, I was channeling Levon with Rick. If you're going to steal from somebody, steal something good.
I love it. I mean, but ultimately, when do you feel like you found your own individual sound? Like, was it in the Navy band? Was it in the Poconos? Like, I mean, obviously you borrow. Everybody borrows and steals.
Oh, I don't know about my own. As we talked earlier about Russ Savakis told me who was the contractor that hired me on my first studio session in New York. He said, come in with your ass through the door. Like, come in knowing what you're supposed to be doing and give them value for money. Give them what they're going to go home and be happy that they hired you for. So it was that kind of an attitude, and you didn't think of. That's why I like when we started. I'm not a soloist by any means. When I do these drum festivals and I hear these guys. I might have been telling you.
Yeah, and Dugu passed out after that dude was playing a 40 minutes.
Asleep while this
rest
guy
in peace.
Was playing the most incredibly tricky drum solo for 40 minutes. I looked over and Dugu was asleep, man, and he wasn't the only one. But what
does that mean though? No feel, no real. I mean,
feel, chops, all that stuff. But if you did that shit on the gig, they'd never ask you to come back.
Right.
But so when I started in the business, it was like play what's necessary to get the job done and make the record sound as good as possible. So I never spent any time practicing all of these flourishes and all this. What I like to do is if I'm playing a fill, I want it to be musical for that part of the song because it fits the song. And therefore, I don't have a vocabulary of licks that I can just call upon at any time. My vocabulary is my heart. When I hear the music and my heart tells me, oh, yeah, you anticipate this, or throw something in between the vocal and the tenor player here. So I'm just kind of feeling from my soul rather than this thing. I still don't trust this thing sometimes. You can put a lot of knowledge in it, but it can't play a groove.
I feel so the deep spirit of Chuck DeMonico with us here, and
I hope so.
What a dear man.
Yeah.
I mean, with guys like DeMonico's not with Beck, for instance. Is there a way for you to demonstrate the kind of grooves that you would play? Beck was more of that was a psych rock group that you.
Beck was like kick it off and hold on.
Joe Beck we're talking about here.
Yeah, Joe Beck. It was like kick it off and hold on to your seat.
Let's see something.
I don't know what to play from Joe's. I mean,
people are calling for it.
We did one of the tunes Tom Scott wrote it. It was "Give Me Liberty." I don't remember the song from The Pleasure Principle, but Tom wrote a song "Don Dan Do Do Do" in 7. Some wild experimental kind of rock and roll going on.
Were you playing jazz standards at the Fillmore, or was it all originals?
Oh no, there's no jazz there. We were disguising rock and roll with some jazz.
I love it. The inflections.
Yeah, but no, it was great fun, and I loved all of the odd time stuff, especially after working with Airto. Airto opened my eyes to a lot of the odd time stuff. 7 was a mystery to a lot of drummers and musicians back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And Airto wrote a song called Mr. Rada. It's on the Quartetto Novo album. And it goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. He says it's like a man walking with a limp. But I loved it, and we used to play it with Astrid. It goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what he's doing is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's how you count that.
And you said you played the bossa a little bit straighter. You got some gigs because of that fact. You weren't playing strictly the bossa, the Brazilian bossa. It was,
the bossa nova pattern is. So, in those days, I listened to some of the Brazilian records, and I had the good fortune of being in Brazil in '63 in the Navy band, and the cross deck, they moved it around. They did a little, like a little jazz. As long as this never stops. So that music just got to me, and it got to me so much that when the jazz in the studios in New York was coming into the pop culture in jingles and all of that stuff, and the jazz guys, God bless them, they would come in and play this kind of a beat. They would kind of swing it.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And the producers wanted this real straight. And so I thought Brazilian. That's where I got it from. And that was one of the things that got me started as a drummer in New York, because I could play the straight eighth, squaring the eighth note kind of rock time.
Talking to Denny Seiwell here, live from LA in his studio. What are you most proud of or what are the biggest components of being a leader? You just have this new album out in a trio. You're very happy about it. It is you claim, some would argue, your finest work, jazz work.
For me, it's my finest work.
And explain why, because I mean, you've done you've done it all.
Well, these guys, when I first met them, I was trying to help a friend out with a restaurant here in Woodland Hills, and I bring different combinations of guys in one night a week to play some jazz. And I got John Cudini and Joe Bagg to come one night. Joe brought his little portable organ and John on guitar. And we just started playing some tunes that everybody knows, and it was magical right off the bat. So we started playing together regular, made a record here in this little home studio. And this new album, though, I got signed to a record label called Quarto Valley Records, QVR Records. It's a new label. And he gave me just enough money to go into a studio, record it properly, and go to Al Schmidt and Capitol Studios and have it mixed. And in selecting the material for the record, the first record, Reckless Abandon, was really a nice record, but we didn't spend a lot of time selecting the material or getting it ready. We just came in here and started slamming music down. And I still love that first record a lot. It was very raw and very real. But the second one, we had more of a plan, and John Cudini was really, he spearheaded a lot of it by bringing in some obscure Brazilian tunes.
Moacir Santos.
Yeah, April.
Mark
Child.
Levine's tuning into this. He knows. I mean, that was a. He's,
Yeah, and Curumim, one of my favorites. We do that live with the trio. That's a Cesar Camargo Marianos, and John wrote a tune called Cheetahs and Gazelles. It's an awesome kind of a Brazilian vibe tune. And we did another one called by Azimuth. Band Azimuth did this record called Cascades of the Seven Waterfalls. Another beautiful song, but there's 4 or 5 Brazilian tunes on it, and Joe Baggs written some stuff. John and Joe each wrote 3 songs, so 6 of the 12 songs are originals. And the record just turned out to be, since we rehearsed a whole 3 days, 3 hours a day, this is challenging material to begin with, and we all had music stands, and the music was there in the sessions because it was so difficult to play. And when I started seeing where this was going and the amount of honest passion that was coming from recording this stuff, I just started to get excited. And then when I started hearing the final product and put it together, arranging this song after that, sequencing the album,
sure,
getting it mixed and mastered and all that, and every day I listen to it once or twice, and it just keeps growing on me because of the beautiful melodic lines played within each tune. And it's not one of those standard records where, all right, state the head, the guitar player plays a couple of choruses, and the organ player plays a couple of, maybe there's a drum solo, and take it out. This, it's just state the head, and then John would take a line, and Joe would take a line, then John would take a line, and Joe, and it's just so beautiful. There's very little, if any, ego in it.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Yeah, it's a musical conversation.
It's very unique. I, to my best knowledge, I can't imagine another jazz record like this. And I believe that because of the way this is recorded and the material and the performances, that I believe that it has a lot of crossover to non-jazz listeners. It's not one of those deep, heady things that only a jazz person is going to understand. This is there for the masses. It's got up-tempo, excitement, vibe, nothing sleepy about it whatsoever. And I'm just real, as you can tell, I'm more excited about this record than just about any record that I've ever made.
You know, Denny, one of the L's on my show is life, and when I talk about life, it means overcoming adversity. And I was just hoping you could talk about, it's a twofold question. Was there a time in your career where you faced some serious adversity and how you overcame it and how it made you a stronger player and person?
Yeah, yeah, big time. When I left McCartney, I left after being top of the heap in New York, and now I'm playing with one of the best known guys on the planet, and we had some problems, and that's why I left the band. Some was music, some was finances, but I left the band. I made a pretty bad decision in my life rather than talk it through. So if you're listening out there, don't do something until you talk it through.
You mean we talk with trusted peeps, with people you trust?
Yeah. And so when I came to L.A., figuring that L.A. would just open its arms and welcome me and all the good work would appear again, and they didn't know who I was. They thought I was an English rock and roll drummer that played with Paul McCartney. They didn't know that I was a musician that played everything. So talk about adversity. And at the same time, I had it was a few years after I got here. That would have been 75, but around 1991, I had a spiritual upheaval where I decided I couldn't live with this angst that I was carrying around with me from the result of the end of the days with Paul, which really broke my heart. Paul was the most exciting, most creative musician I've ever been associated with. So I lived with a lot of regret and a lot of pain and stuff all of those years. And that kind of pain just follows you around. In fact, it doesn't follow you. It goes in front of you. The door opens and your pain comes in first. It's kind of like stepping into the room with a pants full of stinky matter. You know what I mean? And I was really, talk about despair. I was in despair, And the only thing I could do that would make me feel better was to drink over it, use a little drugs. And I try to numb myself from some of the feelings I was having. And that lasted too long, but one day I woke up and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I decided to stop all of that, and I went to a program, and I got some help, and it's been over 27 years now since I haven't had a drink or a drug. But when that first began, I wasn't getting hired, and the phone wasn't ringing, and my skills weren't needed, and all of this, and I just remembered, God will move a mountain for you, but you better bring a shovel. And so I said, well, how can I really help God to help me with my life? And so I started teaching, and I started doing anything that required playing music. I never had a regular gig. I don't ever want one to. But I put on a tuxedo and go play weddings, play with club date bands, or casuals as they're called out here, and go for $150. Here I live in one of the biggest bands in history, and I'm doing whatever I can to get my name known. And then people like Chuck DeMonico out here, who was my brother. I miss him more than anybody on this planet.
The guy drove a truck at O'Hare Airport by day and was playing.
The finest bass player ever to live on this planet. Just a phenomenal man.
Wow.
He had his problems, and that's why you love Chucky. But Chucky told all the contractors, he says, you need this guy on your list.
Right.
And he'd tell them in such a way that when Chuck, the MVP 10 years in a row as a bass player for the studio world, when he told you need this guy, that came with some heavy credence. So I started making my way into the studios out here. And unfortunately, it was bad timing because that was around the time of the drum machine. And pretty soon, musicians strikes, drum machine comes along. People are using a Linn drum machine and all other machines. They don't do song demos anymore. Musicians' income went dramatically down. From doing 3 to 5 demos a week and a couple of sessions, you had no demos and a couple of sessions. So things got tough out here for musicians, and I had to find my way into making it for myself,
Well, that's what I wanted you to talk about, is that a lot of cats, a lot of true artists, I just wanted you to talk about that nexus of genius and addiction. It haunts a lot of artists, a lot of people that want to be very creative, and a lot of cats don't make it through.
Well, there's a great degree of patience involved with it, too. Everything happens in God's time. I'm not one of those.
Well, DeMonico was the God. He was God's. He came out of the heavens.
Yeah, that was God. But what I do now is I try to get up and do the best I can do every day, and in doing so, I'm trying to do what my Creator has me doing. And sometimes he's old and he moves slow, so you can't rush this guy. Sometimes it takes a little time until you get the smile back and life starts getting better for you. Then you can relax a little bit and enjoy it. But for me, it was a whole new way of thinking. Because talk about musicians promoting themselves. I don't know anybody. Any musician that's a good promoter of himself, I don't want to play with. I'm sorry, but I'm not good at that. I love to let my sticks talk for me, my heart talk for me, And over time, you play with Shelby Flint's band. We played for a while, and people would start, wow, I thought that guy used to play with McCartney. Wow, look at the stuff he's doing. He's really a great player. Oh, no, he's a reader too? Oh, he's doing film dates. Sure, he's playing in the orchestra.
Jingles.
He's a jazz drummer first. What? Oh, my God, where did all this stuff come from? So eventually people started knowing about me, and my career got good again.
Patience. You were not patient when you went in. I want you to tell the story to the audience about going in and having the audacity to ask Elvin if you could play with McCoy.
That's called hunger. I was hungry. Not to make money. Hungry to make myself known. I was a kid. I'd gone down to see Elvin Jones at a place called Pookie's Pub.
Gene Perla played there a lot, yeah.
Did he?
Oh, yeah.
And I knew Gene, yeah. And the place was empty. It was a weekday. The place was empty.
Of course.
I hear Elvin with Frank Foster, Jimmy Garrison, and McCoy Tyner. It was just about the Coltrane rhythm section without Coltrane. And I heard a set, and I was just blown away. I was so thrilled to hear Elvin live, who was my hero. And after the set was over, he came over and said hello, and we were talking a little bit. And I said, I just know every record you made. I love your playing. You've done so much to help me bring my style about and everything. And I said, "It'd be all right if I sat in with your band."
After
like an idiot.
Yeah, right. And he said, and he said yes.
And he said yes. So the next set, there's still nobody there. A few people maybe. He plays a drum solo that the wallpaper is peeling off the wall. It was pretty astounding. And he said, "Come on up here. Here, kid. Here's the sticks." So he hands me the sticks, and I get up and I play with the band, played a tune. I don't remember what it was, but I just put my heart into it. I played, I had fun, and I said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He took me outside. We were standing outside, throwing me up in the air, calling me a white mother. You can play the drums, and the guys were real sweet to me and everything. Now we're standing out there talking, and I see this bum coming down the street. And it's a bad neighborhood in those days in New York. You could get robbed.
It was fierce out there,
and
man.
This guy looked like he was about to rob us.
You're like, "Yo, Elvin," and Elvin's asking.
I was a little worried because I'm pretty big, and Elvin's real big. So I'm glad I was with him. I said, "This is gonna be okay." But the guy gets closer, and Elvin sees him. He goes, "Hey, come on over here. I want you to meet this white kid that can play the drums. Denny, meet Art Blakey." And I was floored. We hung out and talked for a minute. And I didn't say anything. I was speechless, It was one of those periods where Art was having a tough time in life. And he had them occasionally, but Art Blakey and Elvin Jones and me, give me a break.
Are you able to put into words what that, you talk about Art having a hard time, Stan Getz, all the cats. What was the jazz life when you got to that magical time in New York in the 60s? What did that represent? Did it mean that you needed to go through hard times, that you needed to be scuffling?
No, I think more than that, I think the common fallacy of drugs make you play better. And all of those guys, especially that older jazz community, they had a fascination with heroin, and it was the demise of most of them.
Shooting heroin, not smoking it.
Heroin. Yeah. Well, there's everything, but yeah, they would get strung out on heroin. And some of my most favorite players of all time are just not here anymore because of it. Guys like Joe Farrell. Joe was a dear friend, and I'm sure that he'd be alive today if he never met the old smack machine, And it was a shame that they glorified heroin so much. And I remember Donald McDonald shooting up one night at a party. I said, "Why do you have to do that, Don?" He said, "Oh man, I play so much better." And I said, "Wow."
He bought into that.
I don't want to disagree with you, but so it was never part of my thing for sure. But I think creative people are always looking for something that give them an edge.
Yeah.
And I believe that getting outside of yourself. With LSD, with cocaine, cocaine, all that. But I think that the heroin provided a role, and some of these guys bought it, and it's sad. And obviously, Art Blakey was on one of those times of his life where he was strung out.
I just the idea here is that what do you talk to younger cats about today in order to get a creative edge without hard drugs?
Well, I tell them, "Hey man, your mind is out to get you.
Your mind is on vacation.
Your mind just got you here to a point of surrender in your life. Don't listen to your mind for a while. Give us a chance to show you another way of life." And there's books, there's spiritual material, there's all kinds of things, but there's an obvious, like a 12-step program that there's 12 steps to wake people up, to get a person to understand that he's powerless over this substance, or that he's got all of these a life full of resentments and fears. And as soon as you start understanding your part in a lot of this stuff, you start accepting it. Oh, I had a part in this relationship that I always had problems with. I have a part in it. And when you sincerely try to change from that, all kind of miraculous stuff happens.
Like what?
You get happy, joyous, and free. Now I'm using some verbiage that a lot of people know, but you know, if you want to be happy, joyous, and free, you clear your life up of resentments and fears and sex stuff. We'd hardly be human if we didn't have sex
Absolutely.
problems, you know. So all of this stuff gets addressed in these programs of recovery, and for me there's only one. I don't mention it because I believe in the traditions, but it's just so much better way of life when you take the power away from the substance that's dragging you through the gutters and the glass and just dragging you around, making you miserable and wanting you dead. And it's really hard to do, but I've seen so many people recover from this disease, and it's just a disease. And once somebody that has it starts even understanding that, oh, I'm really not bad, I just have a disease, and there is a treatment for the disease, and if I spend a little time and take that treatment, I think life's going to get better, and it has for so many. It's one of the greatest gifts of my life, besides my talent for playing the instrument, is being able to help people out of that loop.
I just want you to talk, as we wind down here with Denny Seiwell, can you talk about a time on the bandstand when you left your physical body?
Oh, there were too many for that. I mean, that goes back to the Poconos when we used to go play with Johnny Coates afterwards. I mean,
Coates, oh man, the Deerhead, yeah.
You know, Deerhead. I mean, we'd rush through the snow and sleet and ice to play the last set with Johnny Coates and hope you could get a chance to sit in. Sometimes Keith Jarrett would be there playing soprano sax even, you know. But every time I was into that situation, I left my body and I was just a vehicle of the music. And that happens when you're free enough, when you've learned your craft well enough that you can think of something in your head and you can perform it on your instrument. Then you come to a place where you're free enough to just trust your heart and go for things that you hear in your head.
When you're talking about on the spot, totally on improv. You know, it's in your head and you can apply it right in that real time. Yeah.
Well, I did it when we started this. When you asked me to play a solo,
you're gonna end the interview by playing a solo too.
Well, I mean, I just start playing something, and then you just kind of let it develop. You know, I don't think about it. If you think about it, you probably screw it up.
For people that are going to watch this in 20 years or 50 years, or you know, I just would like you to talk about the idea that the significance of a musician as a profession. It's not a musician. Music is not a musician's gift to the world. It's a profession, and it's done by very brilliant people. And I want you to advocate for that, because I feel in this society, maybe not in Japan or in Europe, but especially here in the States, the significance of music has changed in our culture. And I want you to push back on that and explain why it is absolutely a profession.
That's really hard to put into words. I went into music because I had to. I had a calling beyond a football player, a banker, or a police officer,
priest,
a fireman, you know, anything. I just had a calling that anytime I heard music, I got happy. And anytime I played music, I got even happier. And when I played music, I got happy, but I realized that I was limited. So I had to learn more and more and more and more. It's the only thing I wanted to learn more about in my life.
I dig, man.
I got a stack of books I didn't read. I've got a lot of horse sense, but you know, I'm definitely not an intellect. But I have a lot of heart, you know. And I learned from the school of hard knocks. So being a musician, what other job do you have that allows you to get out of your body nightly on the bandstand and make people react to it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, but you make people react to it, and usually it's good. When you see somebody out there just closed eyes and their heads nodding back and forth and they're just grooving so hard, you just put some joy into that person's life.
Huh.
And that's what music is about. I don't play for the people. That's the byproduct. That's the byproduct of what we do. And if we give from the heart totally freely and honestly, that's the result. And that's what keeps me coming back. Every time I see somebody that gets what I'm doing, and I can touch their hearts for a minute, man, I'll be doing it some more.
Let's finish out with the Denny Seiwell. You're not a soloist, but just play something. Play something, and it's such an honor to hang with you, man. And thanks for dropping the enlightenment. People were loving this interview. People were flipping around Facebook. They found you, and they love it, man.
Well, I want to tell you something, Jake. You're really one. I've done a lot of these interviews. You can go on YouTube and see all of the interviews I did. But you are the most profound, prepared person that I've ever talked to. And you're the only guy that I allowed to come stay in my house and do this with me in my home studio and stuff. And I appreciate you because you're like a musician without an axe, man. You're doing this for all of the right reasons and the passion. So if anybody's out there and they're thinking about doing something, just remember, find something that you do for free and do it like your life depends on it.
Absolutely.
Because it does.
Well, let me tell you something. Like you said, once you get your craft down enough and you can apply it without thinking, that's really where I'm at. This whole interview, our 4 interviews were essentially right off the top of my head. But it's just gotten to a point where I'm operating on that frequency. And I appreciate the fact that you guys, the brother and sisterhood, has helped me find my voice, man. So much love to you.
Oh, much love back, man.
You're not going to get off the hook, though. You play a little bit before we go.
Maybe I can play along to one of my tracks for my record.
Okay, we're going to do what you want. Yeah. Just let's hear Seiwell. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit.